This Manhwa starts off just after a horrific crime has taken place. The Duke is dead, and worst of all, his death is whispered to be no accident, but instead, a mapped-out murder as discussed by people in the kingdom. Even on board a ship, sailors discussed the recent horrific incident that was the talk of the entire kingdom. The dreadful murder of Duke Looting. Rumors spread quite quickly. Many of them spoke of the excessive brutality inflicted upon the deceased body, and that the prime suspect in the crime was the Duke's wife, Brienne. Looting Brad, her sudden disappearance, and information suggesting that it was revenge for harm done to her family supported these suspicions. However, according to locals, the main character in this story, Brienne, was a petite and fragile lady. It seemed unlikely that she could have committed such a heinous act. She apparently lacked the strength for it. 8 years prior, the young Duchess was preparing for her wedding to Bear and Erica's to Hell son. She was displeased with the overt nature of her wedding dress and confided in her best friend about it. Alexander Kalstein, her confidant since early childhood, couldn't take his eyes off her in the bridal gown. His attempts to compliment her were interrupted by the arrival of her fiancé. The man was rude and dismissive even on their wedding day, showing obvious disdain for Alexander. However, the Duchess defended her friend, explaining to her soon-to-be husband that Alexander had come to present a hairpin in honor of the wedding ceremony. All the young couple may have appeared to be a perfect match, bound by true love. The reality was different, the wealthy baroness to help. We lack the prestige they desired for their opulent lifestyle. The Duchy of Looting-Grab possessed that prestige, but it was the only thing left for the noble family on the brink of financial ruin. Naturally, both families decided to intermarry to address each other's concerns. It was beneficial for all involved. The main heroine readily agreed to help her family, feeling obligated to fulfill her feminine duty, and sacrificed her life by marrying a stranger. This was how her mother raised her. Her parents were immensely grateful as their finances were precarious and the marriage contract implied a deal between the families, with the main condition being the complete sustenance of the duchy, the girl's mother, like in the arranged marriage, to the grand engagement of an imperial family, where an emperor, having seen his future wife just once, found himself overcome with genuine love. Marrying a man like Direct, the beauty was confident she'd find happiness with him. Little did she know what this decision would entail for her. Immediately after the ceremony, the newlyweds headed south from the lady's northern homeland to the territories under the man's control. Moreover, he forbade Brienne from returning home, disregarding the terms of their marriage agreement to all of her objections. The Duke responded with threats to cease supporting her family, even on their journey to their new home. He showed his true colors. The heroine's husband discarded the hairpin gifted by her friend and also used physical violence against her, asserting that she was now his property. The bride's nightmares didn't end there, Rick demanded. She fulfilled her marital duties as stipulated in the marriage contract at his every whim. Otherwise her family would once again face destitution. Subsequently, 8 years later, the man was brutally murdered, stabbed multiple times, and also poison to ensure the Duke's demise. In their 6 years of marriage, the couple remained childless. Naturally, the blame was placed on the beauty, who seemed indifferent to her husband and his infidelities. The new maid felt sympathy for the unfortunate madam, who was not only confined to the castle but also had to endure her husband's antics. Other servants quickly informed the maid that while officially the lady of the house was Brain, the real person in charge was the man's mistress, Lorica. The main heroine was more like an ornament of this house, present purely to uphold the formality of the marriage contract or over. Many servants noticed her unique hobby, painting. The northern lady painted pristine white canvases. In remembrance of her homeland, trying not to forget her roots despite the many years of forced life in the south, she painted places she remembered from childhood, particularly landscapes from one of her trips where she lost the necklace she'd received as a gift at an event on the carriage ride home. Brian's mother scolded her for her carelessness with gifts and promised she wouldn't receive any more like it. Even back then, the young Duchess had a passion for drawing. Her mother believed that no woman could truly excel in the arts, but she thought it a suitable hobby for a docile wife. From early childhood, the main heroine was taught that her primary goal in life was to marry only then, which he fulfilled her destiny. During a conversation about this, the girl's mother referred to the marital history of the imperial family. Every noble lady dreamt of such a favorable and romantic fate for herself and her daughters. Naturally, every noble woman aspired to fall in love with a stranger chosen for her and to find happiness in such a union, especially when it was protested by the arrangement of two families. However, this didn't happen for everyone. Therefore, the beauty's mother taught her to be humble and to accept any fate. Even the most minus one, even if her marriage turned out to be unhappy, she was bound to endure it. For this reason, as an adult, the girl humbly submitted to all of her husband's whims and fulfilled her marital duties at his first call, doing so with evident disgust and without pleasure. Precisely because of this lack of enjoyment, the lady's husband grew to despise her. He considered Brent to be an emotionless and passive woman. The main heroine didn't deny this. She repeatedly told her husband that she was merely fulfilling her contractual duties and derived no pleasure from it. One sunny day, the madam dressed in commoner's attire to take her paintings to a shop and sell them under the guise of works by an artist unknown to her husband's world. She concealed not only her identity, but also the artist's. The merchant was in awe of the unparalleled quality of her work and kept praising it, causing discomfort to the girl who pretended to have no connection to the paintings. During the conversation with the merchant, the beauty learned that nude human figures were currently involved. The artist was offered the opportunity to earn money by painting such subjects. Regrettably, the man was tactless and made several crude remarks to the madam which angered the northern aristocrat. A young man who had been observing the conversation for some time intervened. He sided with the lady who couldn't help but notice the stranger's appearance reminiscent of her native northern lands. Later, the main heroine expressed her gratitude to the man who had come to her aid in such a challenging situation. Thanks to him, she was able to retrieve her paintings from the merchant. During their calm conversation, Chris couldn't resist praising the masterful artwork or overthrew his words. He implied to the lady that he was aware of the artist's identity, although Brian tried to hide the truth, fearing her paintings wouldn't sell if it was revealed a woman was the creator. The man was certain he based his argument on the joy he previously noticed on her face. From the praise, the silver-haired gentleman expressed the desire to get to know the artist better. The heroine was already feeling awkward due to her fears, and his words made her even more anxious. The Duchess realized that if rumors about a female artist spread throughout He, however, persistently suggested they meet again and even designated a location for the rendezvous. The main heroine was taken aback by Chris's insistence in the law, as no one had ever shown interest in her before. The prospect of interacting with someone from the north enthralled her. Among other things, he also offered her the opportunity to continue selling her paintings. Since he had no intention of returning to the merchant's shop, he proposed to handle the sales himself. As they parted, the silver-haired man kissed Brienne's hand and handed her a note detailing the date and location of their next meeting. Confident that the married lady would come to see him again late that night, the madam penned a letter to her friend Sasha. In it, she spoke of the delightful encounter with the northerner and shared all her sentiments. It had been 6 years since she lived in confinement in the south, away from her loved ones and devoid of any connection to them. Even her childhood best friend had stopped responding, and she gradually forgot her homeland. Later, the lady instructed her handmaiden to dispatch the letter to its recipient. Yet unbeknownst to all, the castles had made intercepted it read, and destroyed the note, doing so out of loyalty to her beloved duke. Moreover, Lyrica ordered the new servant to remain silent about the incident in the lady's presence. No letter written by her had ever been delivered before, but this was a closely guarded secret. 5 days later, the main heroine was indeed planning to meet the silver-haired man. As she remained intrigued by the idea of interacting with someone from the north for the occasion, she decided to dress as a duchess. At the appointed time, the beauty arrived at the rendezvous spot adorned like a true aristocrat in all her splendor. The northerner awaited her, his eyes fixed on her, as were the gazes of other passers-by, unexpectedly and for reasons unknown. The man started to run away from her, naturally prompting her to chase after him. The two rounded a corner where he quickly hid her from her maid, who accompanied her. Later, He admitted that he acted this way intentionally to evade prying eyes and company. He wanted some private time with the beauty, unaware, it seemed, of her true social standing until then. Chris explained that her appearance garnered widespread attention due to its elegance and charm. As such, they wouldn't have been able to converse properly. He also expressed concern about local thieves who might attempt to harm Brain. The main character understood his reasoning but chose to attend the meeting in a regal attire anyway. She believed it improper to hide her societal status after their acquaintance, shortly after the beauty removed the ring adorned with a precious stone. She wished to give it to the Northerner in exchange for his silence regarding the clandestine sale of her paintings, as that was her primary reason for the meeting. The man instantly recognized the crystal in the ornament. It was a rare and very expensive mineral which in the South was mined by only one individual, the Grand Duke, the wealthiest among all aristocrats. Finally, the pieces began to fall into place for the young man. Before him stood the wife of Derek S. the Hell-on aristocrat, who had traveled from the north to enter into matrimony 6 years prior. Next, Chris hastened to return the ornament as he had no use for such gifts. What he truly desired was different, to get closer to the beauty and to see her studio with his own eyes. Naturally, this surprised the lady. She believed it would be quite challenging to bring a stranger from the street into her husband's home. The Northerner pointed out that she herself wasn't against such an idea, she just didn't. After spending some time in the workspace, the man asked the protagonist for a favor. He wanted her to personally paint a portrait of his nude body, as a merchant had advised him to do for gaining popularity. Naturally, the beauty couldn't agree to such a request, at least not immediately. She found it inappropriate to paint another man's nude body within her husband's house, although she was aware that fashionable portraits typically featured women as subjects. Despite her firm refusal, the married lady did imagine what it would be like to sketch a semi-nude man. Naturally, such thoughts stirred more intimate feelings within her. That same evening, while being intimate with her husband, Brain unintentionally responded to him with genuine passion. For the first time in their 6 years of marriage, her body reacted so since her thoughts were consumed by Chris. The lady's responsiveness surprised and delighted her husband. He could never have imagined that fantasies about another person could be the reason. Later he shared his pleasant mood with his wife, but also mentioned that she shouldn't bring strangers, even models, into their home. This time he chose not to reprimand her primarily because of their newfound intimacy. But protagonists continued to think about the silver-haired man and drew a clear comparison between him and her husband. She saw a stark contrast. The young man was much superior to the licentious duke. The next morning, the kingdom's prince visited the merchant's shop incognito. He was the one who had been purchasing Brain's paintings without even knowing who the artist was at present. The man was extremely upset upon learning that the shopkeeper could no longer sell him any paintings. The heir desired to acquire the entire collection of northern landscapes. The merchant tried to resolve the situation and assist the prince, who was insistent. He described the woman who sold the paintings, falsely claiming she was the wife of the artist. To further his lie, he compared her to one of the nude paintings in his shop. In his childhood, Carlyle had been captivated by northern landscapes. He was the boy who had found the beautiful woman's last jewelry and kept it for himself. Shortly after, the shopkeeper showed the prince the nude painting and deceitfully claimed it depicted the merchant herself. But Prince naively believed him. Noticing he had an audience, the shopkeeper began spreading scandalous gossip. He claimed that the woman who sold the paintings was not the artist's wife, but his mistress, of course. These were mere speculations, which he presented as truth. The man became so engrossed in his tales that he inadvertently began to gossip about the prince himself, sharing lurid and wild details seemingly conjured from his imagination. Unfortunately for him, he went too far, speaking ill not only of Carlyle, but also about the marriage of the prince's parents. This further angered the prince. For this reason, the man hastened to put the commoner in his place. He explained that all members of the royal family wear ornaments bearing the image of a lion and then showed his own ring. The merchant was horrified upon realizing his grave mistake. The insolent fellow fell to his knees, begging forgiveness for his loose tongue. However, the prince was not one to easily forgive others. With his sword, he pinned the shopkeeper to the wall and then demanded the man be grateful for sparing his life. That very night he pondered over the paintings of the missing artists. The heir couldn't deny himself the pleasure of holding them all. But following morning, the protagonist was engrossed in her usual painting of landscapes when a new maid called her for lunch. The young woman recalled hearing that food in the South was the man forcefully took her from the table and led her to a restaurant. Naturally, the entire household staff was shocked by the man's audacious behavior, especially the head maid who seemed to have been put in her place. Lyrica was beside herself with rage. Tipping over the slot that was previously named Brain's lunch, she sent all the maids away, not wanting to endure their taunts. The main heroine was no less surprised by the unfolding situation. For the first time, her husband defended her from the bully and even invited her to dine at a fancy establishment, coaxing her to gain a bit of weight for the voluptuous curves he adored. From the beginning of their conversation, it became clear why the Duke had acted in such an almost noble manner. Derek was entranced by the deep intimacy he felt with his wife. Unable to forget her emotional sensitivity, he told the Duchess that if she continued to respond so kindly and tenderly to him, like a submissive wife, he would not leave her with how good treatment in return. The young woman felt disgusted by what she heard. She had no intention of growing closer to a scoundrel like him, so she pointedly refused to eat to gain weight for him. Suddenly she noticed Chris walking nearby. Her astonishment knew no bounds, so it was unsurprising that Derek also noticed where his wife was looking to ensure he didn't spot the object of Bran's fantasies. She reluctantly ate a piece of meat from her husband's hand. By doing so, she greatly pleased the Duke and thereafter remained subdued for the rest of the meal. Her goal was to meet the Northerner after the feast, so she sent her husband home first. After a brief search, she finally met the young man who was equally pleased to see her. Ensuring he was all right, she decided to leave. But he stopped her. The man with Northerner wanted to take a walk together, so the beauty couldn't refuse. They went to a special place chosen by Chris. Soon the main heroine was led to a dusty hut in the forest. Though it seemed an odd place for a rendezvous, the view from its window was breathtaking. The young man admitted that he noticed the married aristocrat's lively gaze when she looked at him personally. It was as captivating as it was now. While Brienne looked at the landscape outside, the attentiveness of this almost stranger touched the girl's heart. So, sensing the beauty's emotions, he continued. The Northerner shared his admiration for the lady and how he was enchanted by her gaze. On the border of the northern lands, knights were conducting another training session. But it wasn't real combat sachafont, as if it was a matter of life and death. He easily defeated his so-called opponent and then helped him up. Many warriors on the training ground admired the man's skills. At sunset they invited the victor to join them at the tavern. He declined categorically. He wasn't interested in the drinks and women the knights pursued for relaxation. That same evening, Alexander wrote another message to the main heroine. In it, he reminisced about their shared childhood memories and expressed concern over the lack of responses. The man did not hide his affection and attachment to the beauty, and also shared his anxiety for her fate. He hoped to meet his friend at the upcoming ceremony celebrating the prince's birthday. Meanwhile, the lady prepared to paint a portrait featuring the young man. Their interactions have become more informal since the artist discovered the man was younger than her. Unexpectedly, Chris stood before her completely naked. The Northerner naively believed she intended to paint his nude form. However, Brain only planned to capture his face on canvas. The man asked her to set aside any discomfort. Pointing out that they were alone in the cabin, he promised not to interfere with the labor-intensive process of painting and eagerly awaited the resulting sketch. While she was engrossed in her work, Duke Red took a horseback ride through the town's market. He was taken by the flowers from a local woman and without much thought bought a bouquet for his wife, evidently inspired by her recent behavior. While the naive and licentious Derek However, what he saw before him now didn't align with that narrative. The woman in front of him exuded confidence, seriousness, and determination, qualities not fitting someone who'd merely accept her fate as a puppet in the hands of an aristocrat. For this reason, the Northerner became very curious about the canvas's image. Brienne was taken aback by his sudden inquisitiveness. She felt reluctant to show her initial unfinished sketch. Although the sketch captured the deep contours and accurate outlines of the man's body, it seemed rather amateurish, a result of the beauty's inexperience with male anatomy. The silver-haired man didn't find this fact unusual. However, he understood that much of the difficulty arose from her embarrassment. As a solution, he offered her the chance to touch and explore his body to better understand its form before beginning such intimate exploration. The main heroine's eyes were blindfolded to hide both participants. Embarrassment then. The married woman began to tactilely examine every contour of Chris's body. Her fingers gradually touched various parts of his exposed skin, studying each muscle beneath the youth's soft flesh. This process made Brienne's heart race. The Northerner couldn't help but notice her passionate reaction, just as she did he desired more in the next moment. He removed the blindfold from the beauty and kissed her. Soon after, the two gave in to their mutual intimate desires, yearning to be closer to each other. In the midst of it all, Chris revealed his true self. Without hesitation, he expressed to the married lady his longing for her affections, wishing she'd yearned for him as intensely as she did for her home, and she couldn't disagree with that sentiment. After all, her thoughts had long been consumed by the mysterious silver-haired man. Their intimacy lasted until late evening. However, despite the fervor of the moment, the main heroine recalled the words of her strict mother, who had advised her to refrain from reckless acts during marriage. Now the beauty disagreed with her mother's viewpoint. She believed that any sane person in her position would choose to be with the northern land without feeling shame or remorse. By day's end she returned to the mansion in a rather disheveled and embarrassed state. The Mains couldn't help but notice, but none gave it much thought. Almost immediately after her return, her husband came back to the castle. As was his habit, he proceeded to shower the head maid with compliments and even gifted her a lovely flower from the market. However, something had certainly changed in the next moment. The man presented a whole bouquet of beautiful flowers to his wife and also showed genuine masculine interest in her. Late at night, the last full Duke waited in the bedroom for his wife for an extended. But she was so engrossed in painting a new piece that she lost track of time. Derek went to her studio and noticed that drawing. He was shocked to find that his demure wife was sketching the body of a naked man. This hobby of the married lady began to unsettle her husband. During their conversation, the Duke expressed his displeasure through criticizing the wastage of painting materials. He called Brienne selfish for not coming to the bedroom on time to fulfill her marital duties. Additionally, the enraged aristocrat couldn't hold back his criticism of the paintings featuring northern landscapes. He mentioned that the woman painted what she could no longer retain. These words compelled the beauty to deduce that her husband was hiding something about her family in the northern regions. Hence she began to question him. The Rick, however, refused to answer and walked away. She vowed to defy him again and again, as she wasn't willing to engage in any intimacy until she heard news about her family. The night ended rather unfavorably for the head of the family for my morning. He could barely chew his food due to the pain. Naturally, the servants had a good idea whose handiwork had caused his injuries, but nobody dared make light of it out loud. Perhaps fearing dismissal, the already angered man asked his mistress to cut his food for him. She, of course, gladly agreed. The Duke tried to reproach his wife for not showing the same obedience to his commands. But the lady seemed to suddenly grow a backbone. The married woman responded sharply and crudely, comparing the aristocrat's complaints to the barking of a stray dog. Her behavior astonished everyone. To prevent further inflaming the quarrel between the couple, the main heroine hastily left the dining table. As a parting shot, she suggested that the maid finished her breakfast leftovers. Hinting she might gain the voluptuous figure her husband seemed to prefer, it was that fiery remark that made the depraved libertine smile. He naively believed that the beauty was jealous of him because of Lorica. Consequently, he was delighted by the thought that he evoked genuine intense emotions in her. Later, when the young woman found herself alone in her chambers, she uncontrollably began to reminisce about the embrace of another man. Thanks to Chris, the artist finally felt truly alive. She couldn't shake off the desire to meet this man, so she quickly set off to see him. Dressing as a commoner but donning a valuable necklace, she made her way to the town. On her journey, she unexpectedly encountered her perverse husband, who, it seemed, was not pleased with her excursion, though he let her go. He decided to secretly follow her. After all these years, the Duke had finally become captivated by his wife. Thus he couldn't suppress his jealousy towards her. he decided to find out where she was headed. The main heroine despised traveling by carriage, especially since the very first trip to the south when her husband tormented her and her feelings yet. For Chris, she was willing to endure even that. The Duchess's husband trailed her all the way to the town. Imagine his surprise when he noticed that the beauty walked past the art studio she usually visited. He hurried to catch up with her in the crowd. Since this took place on one of the town's bustling streets, the man didn't even notice when he bumped into a fruit cart, damaging its contents. Wanting to avoid the wrath of the vendor, he intended to pay for the damages. But he had been robbed earlier. An angered crowd of locals descended upon the panelist man who had caused significant damage to another's property. And in the chaos, Derek lost sight of his wife completely. Meanwhile, the kingdom's crown prince sat admiring one of Brain's paintings. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the beauty of the northern landscape depicted. While thinking about the artwork, he also pondered its creator. The painting transported the adult Carlyle back to a wintry day in his distant childhood when he had found the heroine's locket in the snow. In the meantime, the married lady had reached her lover's cabin. As soon as she entered, she told him about her husband, supposedly unnoticed pursuit of her, which he had successfully evaded. The story amused the young man Chris. However, he realized they needed to be more cautious in the future and come up with a cover story for her visits. Unexpectedly, she kissed him. Brienne confessed that she couldn't stop thinking about the silver-haired man all night. This revelation took him by surprise, but he felt the same. Soon after, the two lovers decided to share another intimate moment. Despite the age difference and the main heroine's marital status, the union of the two young people was tender and caring. Both displayed every possible emotion and affection towards each other. Later, the girls studied the young northerner's body, curious about the origins of various scars he told her about his harsh life. Isn't orphan in the on jobs he took wherever he could. Unexpectedly, during another intimate moment, there was a knock at the cabin door demanding entrance. Outside stood three rough-looking mercenaries. After beating one of them bloody, he warned the others to leave while they could, clearly offering them a chance to depart peacefully. But they refused to listen. The second and third men drew knives, hoping to overpower the northerner with them, to no avail. The young man defeated one of the remaining mercenaries and disarmed the other two. At the fight's conclusion, he ordered one of them to leave, this time threatening them with their own weapons. He also demanded that they forget they ever saw the lady in the cabin, or they pay with their lives. Naturally, recognizing the young man's combat advantage, the mercenaries agreed to all terms. Without further dispute, they were allowed to leave alive. Upon returning to the cabin, Chris was met with the distress of the married lady. She was concerned that he might have been harmed, having heard male shouts outside the window. Fortunately, the northerner assured her that he was more than okay. However, their time together had come to an end. The frightened lady couldn't stay any longer, fearing her husband's wrath. During their conversation, the young man inquired about Brain's relationship with her husband. She candidly revealed that she felt he was the main adversary in her life, as if the aristocrat was born merely to torment her. The youth understood and completely shared his lover's disdain for the Duke. Feeling that he himself was viewed unfavorably by him, unexpectedly the lady asked the Northerner to find out about her family. She was concerned about Derek's earlier words and wanted to know the genuine news about Hull Image. At the moment, Chris was the only person she trusted, and he also had connections to the northern regions. The young man promised to do everything possible for the married aristocrat. After hearing all of the lady's concerns, he correctly deduced that none of her letters had actually been sent. He explained that since the estate servants lacked even a shred of respect for the lady, they shouldn't be trusted. The Northerner suggested devising a plan that would restore the lady's noble status. Soon after, the estate's master returned from what he called a walk. He immediately went to take a bath after another meeting, this time from the local townspeople ahead. Maid assisted the master in washing his body, and at the same time deliberately informed him about the peculiar behavior of the beauty lately, aiming to sow doubt in his feelings for her. At sunset, the Northerner examined a childhood portrait of the main heroine. Found in a locket she had previously lost, he longed to embrace the depicted girl, evidently not recognizing her as his current lover. A bit later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the young man headed into a secret hideout for a meeting with the client regarding a particular assignment. There, he reported on the progress of a specific plan from the conversation between the two. It became clear that Chris was a mercenary tasked with finding evidence within Duke Derek Lootinggrad's house that would incriminate him in a plot to assassinate the heir prince. The Northerner informed his employer, who was Carlyle himself, that the task at hand was challenging but more than achievable. He requested 1 month for its completion 8 years prior. The heir to the throne had given the young mercenary his first covert assignment to retrieve the Marquis's hand. Although Chris was still a child then, he flawlessly executed the task. At their very first meeting to discuss details, he presented the severed limb, complete with its adornments, greatly alarming the aristocrat. As payment for the task, the boy gave the assassin a medallion he had found. Earlier in the snows depicting the main heroine, the prince was unaware that it contained someone's portrait. During their conversation, the young aristocrat revealed his identity and also offered the Northerner a lucrative job by his side to be a covert assistant executing secret missions. Naturally, the boy was not against the opportunity to earn more and thus agreed. Later he opened the locket and was surprised by the portrait. Inside In return for completing this assignment, the silver-haired individual was promised the Duke's title. This would allow the young man to live carefree in the future, making the effort worthwhile thanks to his skills and a clear plan. Chris intended to perfectly execute his final illicit task. He also aimed to provide the prince with the desired peace of mind concerning his safety, and in the process went over the girl he loved. One part of the Northerner's assistance to the main heroine was advice, primarily to have her own people in the estate to gather information about household events more. easily than usual. To this end, the beauty decided to befriend the castle's new maid. A lady invited her for a private meal in her chambers, thereby distinguishing her from the rest, then piquing the curiosity of others. Naturally, after such an event with Brienne, the maid was bombarded with questions from the inquisitive fellow servants. However, she knew what to reply. The Duchess had given her clear instructions regarding the answers, as suggested by the silver-haired man. The girl asked the household worker to inform others that the main heroine was a fascinating and intriguing individual with her secrets in this way. But girl aimed to demonstrate that she too had a temperament in a hidden agenda which might potentially rival the estate's chief maid. According to Chris's opinion, such subtle changes in the lady's behavior might not only arouse interest in her among the other mates, but also force them to reconsider their personal relationships with her. Thus rumors began to circulate that the mistress of the estate was planning something secretive. The fear induced by the unknown was the best tactic among all available in this situation. The man not only crafted an effective plan, but also helped Brienne endear herself to the new maid, who, thanks to the attention shown to her, was now treated much better. The Northerners' support yielded results faster than anticipated. All the estate's maids could talk about was their mistress, which immensely irritated Lorica, who was evidently vexed by the ongoing situation. Earlier, she had whispered various ambiguous things to the Duke concerning his wife, hoping to sow doubt about her loyalty. However, the outcome wasn't what she had hoped for. While the man might have been jealous, he had no plans to abandon his wife. During his intimate moments with his mistress, he couldn't focus, and as a result, things ended rather quickly. Later on, the villainess managed to ignite the man's rage. She mentioned a recent letter the lady tried to send to a friend whom Derek had been immensely jealous of since their wedding. The Duke realized that he couldn't allow his beautiful wife to communicate with people from the north, for she might discover the secret concerning her family that the aristocrat had been hiding all this time. Lyrica couldn't help but notice the anxiety clearly etched on the man's face. Hence, instead of providing reassurance, she deliberately fanned the flames of his negative emotions. The maid led the Duke to suspect a possible secret liaison between his wife and her best friend. Long before their marriage, the Rick vividly imagined every detail of such an affair. This drove the man into a deep fury about the situation. Moreover, he understood that the main heroine could potentially meet Sasha at the upcoming ceremony in honor of the prince's birthday. The Duke's favorite played into his passionate rants about the imagined affair, elaborating with great detail. She did this deliberately, hoping to become more appealing to the estate's master than his wife. During their conversation, another reason for the commoners' harsh words about the beauty emerged. She was enamored with the idea of the lavish event and desperately wished to attend it. The main wished to replace the northern aristocrat at the event. Therefore, without any modesty, she proposed to Derek that she accompanied him instead of Brain, ostensibly for a noble cause. The woman justified this not by her brazen desire, but as an attempt to help them and prevent his wife's infidelity. With However, this time the other maids didn't tolerate being demeaned by the foremost among them. They understood that the estate owner's favorite was losing her power, and thus they weren't afraid to confront her. The servant's arrogance was boundless. She dared to strike her colleague for the audacity directed at her, evidently considering herself above others in status. Which was not the case. While the woman might have been coarse, and deep down she understood that the servants were right and her lineages couldn't be changed, she still yearned for all the luxuries of the worldly life. In despair, either out of anger at the ongoing events or fury at her fate, the audacious woman decided to spread indecent rumors about the main heroine behind her husband's back. Unaware of the repercussions, a few days later a new maid informed Brienne about the gossip surrounding her and who initiated it. While the young lady was angry, she realized this had been brewing for a while. Later on, the rumors and their origin reached the head of the household. The man was horrified by such a rash act from his mistress, since she had openly compromised him in front of society. The servant recognized that due to her actions, the local residents and the entire aristocracy would think there was discord between the ducal couple. This would tarnish the man's reputation, but it seemed that only he was concerned about it. From the lovers' conversation it was clear that Lorica acted out of a sense of hurtful injustice that had taken root in her heart from the unfolding situation. She tried to make the Duke reconsider. The maid believed he was free to take her to the event instead of his wife, especially if there were so-called troubles between the married couple. Such an assumption made the aristocrat laugh. He responded that such folly was impossible, and even explained why. Despite the mistress's beauty, one glance at her made her lineages clear. Attending a celebration in the imperial palace accompanied by a commoner would be akin to a complete downfall for any noble. The reputation would be tarnished for many years to come. The woman couldn't bear the verbal cruelty of her lover Derek, and thus shed a tear before his very eyes. The latter, as aristocrat, once again displayed his despicable nature. He hastened to embrace and comfort the maid, who, even though she had compromised him, had done so out of her own foolishness. Due to her evident naivete and ignorance of high society, she had intended to rid herself of the madam at any costs. Even if the main heroine managed to uncover all the rumors at the right time and didn't get caught with her lover by those in the know because of the gossip, the beauty wouldn't be able to meet her lover. For some time late that same night, the married lady was awakened by the advances of her husband, who was deliberately intent on fulfilling his marital duties while she was asleep. The man justified his desire as a necessity, as they were to attend an event in honor of the prince's birthday the very next day. The Duke wanted to display the unity of the couple, and in his view, intimacy was the way to achieve it. The main heroine had no wish to endure another such ordeal with her husband. Having found happiness with a young man from the north, she was more than aware of her heightened aversion to Derek. For this reason, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Realizing that intimacy was inevitable, she assumed a dominant role in the process. To avoid the revulsion she felt from the expression on the selfish Duke's face, the beauty pressed the pillow over his face, beginning to suffocate him. Unlike her intimacy with Chris, this act was filled with anger and brutality. However, by morning the man woke up more than satisfied, interpreting Brian's assertiveness not as a manifestation of her animosity, but rather as a sign of her passionate feelings. While preparing for the event, the main heroine was horrified, or entire body bore marks from her husband's advances the previous night, preventing her from wearing a beautiful dress to the ceremony. Soon the celebration at the palace began, and all the nobility of the kingdom hastened to it. The main heroine and her husband also arrived punctually. First and foremost, the Duke and his wife went to greet the birthday celebrant on this joyous day. Looking at the heir, the beauty felt uneasy, much as she did in her childhood. During a casual conversation with a member of the royal family, Derek learned of various assassination attempts on him. The man feigned great concern, albeit insincerely. Naturally, this infuriated Carlyle. Thus the crown prince purposefully tried to provoke the aristocrat with rumors about his family, particularly the discord in his marriage. The man, seemingly anticipating such a move, committed an unforgivable act of indecency. He pulled an accessory from Brienne's shoulder and neck to reveal patches of delicate skin marked from the previous night. With that, the pompous and brazen nobleman tried to prove that his marriage was more than passionate and wonderful, and that all the vile rumors were merely myths. The lady was horrified by his action. The young woman had never imagined that the Duke would exploit the events of the previous night in such a vulgar manner. Naturally, she felt deeply embarrassed, but the crown prince was quick to further humiliate the beauty. He expressed his disdain for such licentious behavior and directly likened the married lady to a woman of easy virtue. This infuriated Brienne even more, yet it seemed her husband simply didn't care. In her distressed state, the main heroine headed for the exit, deeply regretting her attendance and feeling humiliated. Unexpectedly, she ran into her best childhood friend. The man managed to catch the close aristocratic friend by the hand, and it seemed they had both missed each other immensely. In the next moment, Brienne embraced Sasha tightly. She was overjoyed by their long-awaited reunion. The main heroine held a deep affection for Alexander, albeit in her unique way, as he was the only one who always stood by her side and supported her unconditionally. Overwhelmed by emotion, the old friend embraced the beauty so tightly that she could hardly breathe in the strong grip of the robust man. Naturally, he hadn't meant to do it intentionally. Unexpectedly, the man noticed that the girl had an extremely delicate and attractive waist. He couldn't recall her being so slender before her marriage. This not only caught him off guard by their close contact, but also made him concerned for the lady. Naturally, during their conversation, the married woman tried to inquire about the situation at her family home. Much to her dismay, Sasha knew nothing about the beauty's parents, as he had rarely visited his hometown all this while. Moreover, during military training in the North Count, Alexander had come to the family's mansion uninvited, but he was denied entry. Fearsome mercenaries controlled everything who, according to them, were acting on the orders of the Duke. The main heroine felt a strange, uneasy sensation in her chest. Upon hearing this, she realized that her husband was evidently hiding some secret. But she hoped for the best. During their casual conversation, the lady learned that her childhood friend had arrived in the southern regions with his military unit for an entire month. Even more, he would be residing near the Duchy of Looting. Granted, naturally, this news brought immense joy to the beauty. Albeit briefly, she felt slightly more comfortable and safe in the south. Knowing her friend was close by, the interaction between the two did not go unnoticed by the heroine's husband. The moment he saw the girl talking to the Count, he flared up with jealousy and rushed towards them. The irate aristocrat deliberately embraced his wife in front of her close friend, marking his territory much like an animal would. In the next moment, he began to verbally taunt the girl's close acquaintance. All of this was observed by a mysterious girl from the north who was actually the disguised Chris. Clearly he had come to the palace on some secret business of the crown prince, but dared not reveal himself. During the dialogue between the two men, the Duke tried to insult Sasha. Due to his own insecurity, the beauty feared he might forcibly remove an article of her clothing again and reveal her bruises. For this reason, as soon as the nobleman began to speak of indecent matters, she turned and walked away. To the Duke's surprise, the Count wasn't jealous. Instead, he felt disgust at the husband's tactlessness. Later that evening at the event, the wealthiest man in the kingdom conversed with other aristocrats. The rich inadvertently learned of an excellent deal concerning the delivery of rare rubies worn by the queen herself. The man realized that this was a great opportunity to become even wealthier and to finally surpass the crown prince. He aspired to be the first person to strike a deal with the gem trader to sell those rubies in the south. Soon the beauteous husband was informed that finding the right person at the feast and negotiating would be extremely challenging. Unexpectedly, his peace was disturbed by a young man disguised as a woman. Introducing himself as a ruby merchant, the Duke was captivated by the beauty of the mysterious stranger, but he was even more intrigued by the opportunity to discuss a business strategy that was important to him. Little does he know of this mysterious person's identity, and even more of a mystery is what will happen next. But what is to come? Will this mysterious person sweep the abused wife off her feet? What will happen to the Duke? Will he die again? Will she grow her budding romantic feelings towards the Northern Prince Charming? Comment Northern below for part 2, and why not check out this epic recommendation, Enemies to Lovers.